Welcome to the Pennsylvania State House.
It's great to be here. So this is where they signed the Declaration of Independence.
1776.
Yeah.
They signed the Declaration of Independence here. They come back a decade later and they work on the Constitution and they sign the Constitution.
All of the laws within the federal government and the balance, the fact that that was born in this room.
Right here. It's extraordinary. Right here in this relatively small room in the city of Philadelphia, all of those different interests came together and found their way through it to declare our independence from a king and then to set up the guardrails. And one of my favorite stories in this room is Franklin, who was known to sit on an aisle. We believe in this chair here.
In that chair.
We believe he was fixated on George Washington, who was sitting up in that chair. And what is on the top edge of that chair, you can see half of a sun. He was fixated the whole time on trying to determine whether or not the sun was rising or the sun was setting. And at the end of the Constitutional Convention, he rose to his feet and announced to the founders of our nation that he believed it was a rising sun and that bright days were ahead. I think that gives me chills every time I see that chair, to know that Franklin left this room with all of the challenges, even after speaking about how the Constitution was imperfect. He still thought it was a rising sun. He still had optimism in this new nation. It's an optimism I share today.
You do?
I do. I think that optimism is something that's always defined America. Even in this temporary moment where it feels dark and heavy, I think the sun is still rising.
Things are hard now.
Yeah.
But not nearly as hard as creating an entire democratic government from whole cloth.
Right.
Which is what happened here.
Yeah, and things are hard now, I think, because of the excesses and the corruption and the chaos of the executive. Something that our founders in this room debated, deliberated over. They were worried about creating a government where a king could form again, where one individual would amass so much power that you'd have tyranny all over again. I fear that we are finding our way back to that. I think, unfortunately, you have some profoundly and pathetically weak individuals in Congress who could learn a few lessons from the strong foundation that the founders set for us here in this room.
You want to take me to see the Liberty Bell?
Let's go see the Liberty Bell.
Okay. So there's a quote: "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." How do you interpret that in 2026?
I mean, I think as a nation, over the last 2.5 centuries, we've been working to expand liberty, and we've been working to expand the promise of freedom. Only more recently do we have an executive who, again, I think has accumulated way more power than our founders would have hoped or would have liked, who's trying to restrict liberty, who's trying to put a litmus test on who gets more liberty than others. I think it's really dangerous and destructive, the language the president, by the way, even more so the vice president, uses, that tries to separate out certain Americans and determine which one gets liberty, which one gets freedom, and which one does not.
What do you mean about the vice president? What words or what arguments do you think he's making that you said even more so than the president concern you?
I think in many ways, his speeches overseas, many of the comments he's made here at home are designed to divide and separate Americans, trying to define what is an American outside the bounds of what the law indicates or what the Constitution.
Are you talking about religion? What are you referring to?
I think it's religion. I think it's race. I think it's origin. I think we have a president and vice president who are trying not to lift up all Americans, but to divide Americans and to try and put us in different buckets, different tiers, and try and say who's more American than someone else. And that in and of itself is un-American. So from the Liberty Bell to La Colombe, two great Philadelphia institutions.
It's a Philly day with a Philly boy. There was a NBC poll that just came out that found fewer and fewer Americans say they're proud of this country. Kamala Harris voters, only 12% say they were extremely proud. What do you make of that?
Well, I'm a proud, patriotic American. I think we live in the greatest country on the face of the earth, and we have a lot of work to do to make sure that the promise of liberty that you and I talked about across the street is something that everyone can enjoy. We've got to fix our healthcare system. Our economy has too many challenges in it. So while I am proud to be a patriotic American, while I'm proud to live in this country, I'm also mindful that we have work to do. And I don't think that's mutually exclusive. I think one of the things that the founders made clear is that we were going to be a nation that was a work in progress, and we have a lot of work to do.
A recent CNN poll, again, shows just 28% of Americans hold a favorable view of your party. Does that surprise you?
I think what needs to happen is Democrats need to deliver the way we do here in Pennsylvania, deliver on things that make people's lives better. And I think what we've got to focus on, not just as a party, but in politics in general, are real deliverables for people, on getting stuff done for people and shying away from this performative politics that just makes noise but doesn't make anybody's life better.
And what specifically, or who specifically, are you referring to in performative politics?
I think
the
Congress of the United States has
Democrats
largely
too?
been about performative politics. And yeah, I think you've seen people largely on both extremes that engage in performative politics that might get some likes on Twitter, might, and I mean this respectfully, get your attention in the media, but doesn't actually make someone's life better.
But I do want to ask about one candidate in particular who almost certainly will be in the United States Congress, Daria-Liza Avila Chevalier. She was a PhD candidate at Columbia, an organizer. She called for the abolition of prisons, open borders, ended deportations, even people convicted of violent crimes. She attended a pro-Palestinian rally on October 8th, 2023, a rally that reportedly featured some real anti-Semitic rhetoric justifying the attack. How do you feel as a Democrat about someone with those views being in the United States Congress?
I mean, look, her district voted for her, but I have profound differences from that particular candidate, based on the citations that you read there. And she's not someone, who seemingly I would agree with on many things, or that we share similar values. She ran on the Democratic ticket, I guess, as a socialist. Her voters in that district determined that she was the one they wanted representing her.
But what does that tell you about your party?
I think what our party has to go through that will be very healthy, and something we've not really done since the 1992 election cycle, is to have a battle over what we believe in, to have a battle over the ideas that we are going to hold on to and campaign on and then deliver on as a way to make people's lives better. And I expect our party over the course of this next year or so to go through a battle about what we believe in and then come out unified in a way that we can take the fight to the other side and really deliver for the American people.
I've heard you talk about how one of the ways that you connect with people in Pennsylvania who maybe don't agree with you on a lot of things is through faith, and that you talk about your faith, even though it's different from a lot of your constituents. And that is kind of an entry point. And I'm wondering right now, seeing what we are seeing, whether or not you think as a Jew, you could get beyond Pennsylvania if you wanted to in the Democratic primary system.
Well, look, I'm not going to focus on sort of what happens in 2028. But what I can tell you is when I ran for governor in 2022, and now as I'm running for re-election as Pennsylvania governor, I've been very open about how faith and family guide me in this life of service.
But do you think that that will hurt either you or another person who might run who's Jewish in your party, given the climate right now?
Look, first, I think Pennsylvania is the ultimate swing state, and America can learn a lot from what happens here in Pennsylvania politically and otherwise. What I have found in my years of service in government is that the public wants you to be who you are, be authentic. Let them know what motivates you to serve and why you do this work. My faith teaches me that no one's required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. Very similar to what Ben Franklin preached about citizen participation in our Commonwealth, in our country, in perfecting our union. I think that is uniquely American, this idea that we all have a responsibility to get off the sidelines, get in the game, and do our part. That's what my faith teaches me. That's how my family raised me. That is who I am, and I'm not going to apologize for it.
So this was the president's house. It's where George Washington lived.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're here at a time of real controversy, right? You'll notice that there's kind of these brackets here, right? And you sort of wonder what's going on? Why would they leave this here? It's because the Trump administration came in and ordered that some of the images here that were depicting slavery be torn down. We went to court and we won, and we're in the process of litigating, getting these put back up.
And this isn't just about slavery, it's specifically about the slaves that George Washington had when he was here. What do you think the Trump administration wanted this taken down in advance of 250, or just in general?
They're trying to rewrite it in a way that they think is suitable to their own narrative. There's not one individual narrative that a president gets about our history. There is our history. And any president should want to make sure that that full history is shared, that the American people are able to draw their own conclusions from it. American people are smart. They're able to draw their conclusions. And I believe that when you give them access to that full history, that's empowering, especially at this moment, at 250 years, where we take stock in this great American experiment. If we understand where we came from, then we're going to have a better path forward.